We are back with another Masterpiece You Are series. This time I have Tim Wessel with me, and he's with Thrive Coaching and Ministries. And Tim, I'm so excited to have this conversation because we've been doing this series on domestic violence. And I think a lot of times we think about domestic violence with women, and though that is absolutely true, it also happens with men. And just even getting to see a little bit of your video and your story, I'm so excited to dive in and talk a little bit with you of your journey, how domestic violence really affected your life as a kid, and then where God brought you. So I'm just going to let you take over and share about your journey.
All right. Well, I'll try to summarize shortly just the big picture, and then we can have a conversation about it afterwards. Thanks for having me. Great to meet you. We had a little chat before. Kindred spirits. I love that. I love what you do. I love
Yes.
your heart. So it's exciting to be here with you today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Like everyone else on listening today, I was born. I was born to a mother who had been violently abused, spent part of her life living in a closet. Um, the whole family turned to abuse her. It was okay. So, I heard from all her siblings as we got older, they all participated, and she was just the chosen one for that. She left as a young girl, I think 13. She left the home and wandered home to home trying to find a place to live. She was in farming communities, so she'd like, I'll work, and she was sick, very, very sick. So she was kicked out and kicked out. She couldn't relate to people, didn't know how to do that, very mentally broken. And so she did that for quite a while. And, I know now it was abandonment, it was trauma, it was abandonment, it was over and over. And then walking with her belongings down the side of the road, a woman stopped and asked if she was okay, invited her to come stay at their house, a good Christian woman. And they loved her and they cared for her, and she started rebuilding her life. She had a bedroom in the basement because they had a lot of kids and family there. And she was doing great, school and trying to work and kind of just being normal, still working through a lot of garbage, obviously, but being loved, being pointed toward God. And
Yeah.
as she was there, a couple of years into it, the oldest son, who was away at college, came home. He was drunk and he was high. And I heard the story later that he was trying to get into her room and get her, and they were like, "Ooh," and he was kind of predator like at that time.
Yeah.
They did something to protect her, but he found a way to her and he raped her.
Yeah.
That was her first sexual experience. He's a big man. She's a little itty bitty woman,
Yeah.
probably 100 pounds at the time or so. And she went to her mother figure and asked for help. And the mother's like, I think you have to go. So she was, thrown out of the first loving family she had and ended up in a homeless shelter because she had no family, nowhere to go. And then turns out she finds out while she's there that she's pregnant. So
Mm.
I was born on March 24th, 1968. Her idea was, I have nobody, so I'm going to love this child. It will love me. It will be my family. We'll live happily ever after. But as soon as I was born, colicky, sick child, lots of problems. She was alone, didn't have family to watch her kid while she went to work, all that. So trying to work, trying to build a life, living in garages and things, with a baby, she began to abuse me like she was abused. So my earliest memories, I knew that I was a product of a rape. I knew she didn't want me. I knew that I ruined her life. As it progressed, I made her sick to look at. She wished I would kill myself. She would take me to train tracks. She would, spend 5, 6 hours just pull me out of bed, and I'd have to hold a knife to my jugular vein. And she's like, do it, and just screaming all the reasons I should kill myself. And then she'd hurt herself and she'd go and then tell me it was my fault. So I just had this guilt and shame of like, I hurt my mom, the only person I knew and loved. And I didn't understand. We don't know what's right and wrong at that point. So that was what was going on with us. And, it was very violent, very physically violent. And,
Yes.
as I got bigger and stronger, it was strange that this tiny woman could just look at me wrong and I would fall apart, just tremble. Even as a grown man, healthy and whole, there was still that
Yeah.
element under the surface. But also, as she tried to go to work, she's living in someone's garage, and the family next door said, "We'll watch your son so you can go work."
Mhm.
Well, that man in that home, it was a son of that family, an older son that lived at home. He began to sexually abuse me. So I was 2.5 years old. They predict it started. I was 6 when he got caught. His mom walked in and saw it, told my mother. We don't know how long it went on, but a lot of
Sure.
things pointed to it went on that whole time. And my mother, being broken and struggling as it was, that was just more of a burden to carry. It was overwhelming to her. So she told me from her lips, I just screamed at you and told you you were dirty and disgusting and that you should have told me. And so I felt more shame, like I'm a bad child for letting this man rape me. And, you know, that's all I need to do. Like I didn't know.
Yeah.
And she told me I was acting out sexually. Like I was doing weird things,
Mm.
grabbing people and doing things. And I was exposed to lots of pornography and things with this person too. And that was life. We moved. My mother married, had a child with this man. He adopted me when I was 2-ish, 2.5-ish. So right about that time. We moved when I was 6 after that all happened, and he moved us out to a new town. He was a horseman, race horses, had a lot of friends and, relationships there. One of them was a kid my age I met at the track, lived right behind me in the apartments. And first time I stayed the night at his house, his father came and took me out of the room and started to abuse me. And I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to get out of it. Um, I was little still, and that was a nightmare. It grew progressively worse. He had a friend, he got involved, his kids were involved. As I got older, I think they were more afraid I would tell, and it got much worse. They could come to my classroom in school and check me out of class because they knew my family. And I would sit there looking at that door like, oh, please not today. And it got to where I could predict it somehow, like it's
So
coming soon.
sorry.
But so they progressed to threats and showing me videos of people being hurt and tortured and violence that I couldn't speak of it for half my life without just freaking out because
Sure.
it was so intense.
Yeah.
So, again, everything just broke me. There was degradation, torture, humiliation, things they did that just made me worse than dirt. So
Yeah.
my mind as I grew is I am disgusting, I'm ugly, I'm worthless, I deserve this. Nobody loves me, I don't belong to anybody. And,
Yeah.
just live my life that way. At 12, we moved again. My mother divorced him pretty early in the marriage. And when they divorced, we moved again to a trailer park. I got away from my abusers. They couldn't have access to me anymore. I hit puberty and testosterone kicked in. And so I said to myself, I will never let someone hurt me again.
Yeah.
My mother, the day it changed with my mom, she just beat me. Like, again, I'm 3 times her size and she could just beat me senseless and I couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But one day as she was beating me, my little brother came in and says, Mom, stop. And she turned around and whacked him across the face. I had never seen her spank him before, or yell at him or hurt him. And when she hit him, something clicked in me and I went after her and I cornered her and I was screaming in her face, like, I will kill you if you hurt my.
Yeah. Sure.
And I saw the fear in her eyes and I realized I'm big and I'm powerful. And I didn't say I don't deserve it, but something in me said, I don't have to let it happen anymore. So I
Yeah.
began to fight back. And, we
Yeah.
had a really violent transition, physical violence, obviously emotional
Yeah.
violence, screaming and screaming and screaming. My poor little brother used to think he had the great life, but he grew up in that mess, so he has his
Yeah.
own journey. But it went from bad to worse. When I had drugs and alcohol, it was every day. So, by the time I was 16, I drank alcohol every day to go to school. I would sniff gasoline if I couldn't get alcohol or other drugs. I was
Yeah.
poor, so I worked really hard to get money for our home because we didn't have food. Even though my mom worked 3 jobs, it was just she was struggling to keep up.
Sure.
But I also needed money for the drug habit and the alcohol habit. So, was a hard worker, but for all the wrong reasons. But it let me get out of my shell. Like I couldn't look at a person eyeball to eyeball. I couldn't laugh out loud. I would literally trip walking because I was so self-conscious of how do normal people walk. I'm not normal, so I
Yeah.
would overthink walking, and you almost can't walk when you think about
Yeah.
walking. And really, really just afraid, afraid, afraid of everybody. I had other abuses, sexual abuse from people. It's just like, I don't know if I open that door, it doesn't matter. But adults took advantage of my babysitters. Just at one point, I thought every adult person in my life was having sex with me because I didn't understand, and it began to feel like everybody.
Sure.
But
Sure.
so 12 happened. I progressed in my partying, was in school, was failing miserably in school. I tried to get sober off and on. I'd get detox. I'd go to rehabs. I'd go to mental hospitals. Like there was a lot of intervention, but I had the big sexual abuse story, and I wasn't going to tell anybody because the threat against me, the things I had to see and what would happen to me and others, it scared me. That my pets were killed for them from these people to prove to me their violence. They'd
Mm.
just call and laugh at me on the phone just to make sure I was still scared. Even after I was out of their life, they would do that.
Wow.
So even though I knew, like, I don't know, it was just like I'm not opening that door. Like there was this inherent feeling of doom if I did. So every counselor I looked at, that door wasn't going to open. And my
Yeah.
mom, I didn't want to rat on because I knew I would lose my mom and I knew they would take me away. So I just sat there and didn't engage in any counseling or any of the people that were trying to help
Sure.
and just got worse and worse. I eventually got kicked out of school and kicked out for the final time. They said I couldn't come back. I tried night school, got kicked out. I lost my license very young. I had 19 points by the time I was 16 years old from stealing cars and
Yeah.
just acting out. I met a girl at a party, thought she was beautiful, got to know her. Her mother had taken her life on the living room floor in front of her and her two sisters. And we had the crazy mom story in common. And so we kind of were cheering each other on. Fell in love. I moved in. Her dad was an alcoholic. He just sent money home to her and her sisters. And we played house and I lived with her. And I believed I was loved. So,
Yeah.
there was a spark of trying, like, okay, I'm gonna, take my GED. I'm gonna get a job and keep it, because I want to be with you. I couldn't. I was too mentally broken and addictions were coming in and out. And I was a cheater. I was not faithful to her. And I was abusive because I was so afraid of my, worthlessness. Like nobody's gonna stay with me. So very jealous, very controlling, very not healthy. But I came home one night from a midnight job, and there was a man in bed with her in my bed.
Yeah.
And I walked away quietly. He was a big guy. He was actually a University of Michigan hockey player. So he was a very athletic, huge man. I thought, yeah, maybe I better not do anything. But I left and I drank myself to darkness, blackout drunk, stole my mom's car. I crashed on the way there because I was driving in anger. Left my friends in there injured. I didn't even think to see if they were okay. I just crawled out of the car and made my way to her house. And I went crazy and I just attacked her and her sisters and her friend that was over. Police were called. I assaulted an officer. I pulled him over a wall backwards and I got roughed up pretty good and put in the back of his car. I don't remember the night, but I do remember that officer that I literally choked and pulled over a wall was kind and nice to me. And I remember being confused. Why are you being nice to me? I just did this thing. I think they knew I was in bad shape. I was probably saying the suicide word. I was suicidal. Even if my mom didn't drop me off the train tracks, I went there voluntarily quite a bit. And I never took my life basically because I had fear of eternity. Like I never went to church. I don't know anything about God. I went to church camp once as a troubled child in elementary school, but I thought heaven and hell, that's scary. That's forever. And I don't know about these things. So it literally was in my head and it made me so mad. Like, why am I worrying about this? And I don't even believe in God. But it was a deterrent. But this night I lost it. The police took me back home. I took everybody's phones. I assaulted my family violently. I broke windows. I flipped the fridge. I threw a TV down the stairs. I was covered in blood from hurting myself, breaking things and punching things.
Yeah.
My stepfather was locked in the room, and I was so out of control. I'd run around the house. It was a tiny little ranch, but to make sure no one was trying to get out of a window and get away. And I was hurting my mom, for all she did to me. Like, I have nothing, nobody loves me. It all came out like it was the exclamation point on you're worth this piece of crap and you shouldn't be here and you're never going to be loved and you're a failure and all that. And so I went pretty out of control on them for a while. Eventually calmed down, but I saw a note for a mental hospital on the table where my stepdad and her had been talking. So I knew they were going to have me admitted. And I'm not going back to a mental hospital. Nobody's helped me. I don't trust people that I met. I also felt like nobody was qualified to talk to me about my stuff. So I just had given up on that path. I'd given up on rehab, I'd given up on everything. And that night I went in the basement and I decided it was time. I said, God, I literally talked to God, the God that I don't believe in, but I said, if you are there, my mom was raped, I was raped. There's been, I mean, I am begging to live and find a reason to live, and it's not happening. So why would I want to even be your friend? Like I literally prayed to go to hell. I'm like, if there is a
Mm,
heaven and hell, I want to be as far from you as I can because you're evil. Like you
mm,
did this to us and you don't care.
wow.
And then, crickets. That God didn't strike me with lightning, nothing magnificent happened. So I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought you were going to say, because that's what you always say, right? And then I never went to sleep. I literally felt joy. It was probably the most joyous day of my life. Like, I am never going to hurt again. I am never going to hurt anyone again. Like, my struggle's over. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I put my gun in my mother's car. I had snuck her keys out of her purse when she was sleeping, and I was going to leave in the morning, go to the hardware store, get ammo because we had guns, but ammo wasn't safe around me, so they didn't allow that. We were hunters, so we had hunting
Hmm.
guns. And I went up the stairs to go to the hardware store. I was going to go out to my grandfather's dairy farm. There was a tree I used to hunt squirrel on when I was a kid. And I was like, you know what? I was there half my childhood. It was my safe place. And what that would have done to my grandpa, but that's where I'm going to go. And so
Yeah.
I was just pepping my step. I get up, I go up the stairs, I get to my door. As I get to my door, this guy literally walks up to my door as I'm about to leave. And I'm hungover, I'm bloodied, I'm disheveled. My house is a mess. Like you can see it from the outside from some of the broken windows. And I see him, I open the door, he goes, "Oh, good morning." And he's all happy and excited. And he says, "I was having a coffee at the Wendy's down the street, and God told me to go knock on some doors, and I wanted to tell people this morning God loves you and invite you to come to my church and learn more about him." And my brain's looking at him like, "What are you saying?" Like, and I went off pretty bad. Like, how dare you tell me that? God is disgusting. You're disgusting. I had thoughts of murdering him before I murdered myself. Like I was so angry that somebody would show up of all days tell me God loves me? Like who you little punk? And I say this a lot because there's parts of my story I haven't verbalized really to anybody. I have one counselor I've shared with, but it's so disgusting and horrific. Like I don't want people to even know it happens.
Sure. Sure.
And I I told him all sorts of things about that part of my life. Like I was trying to just scare him away. So
Yeah.
I threatened violence. I told him I'm gross and I'm a murderer. I'm a horrible person. I'm a thief, like wrong
Yeah.
door, buddy. And he didn't leave and he looked at me with compassion, of course, right? And he's just trying to hang out. And I've got the conscious thought at this point in my life, don't trust people because they'll like you today, but nobody's going to stay. Like they're going
Yeah.
to meet you and see how broken you are, especially some little Christian guy. He doesn't want anything to do with someone like me. And then I call it my mustard seed moment. I don't know, the Holy Spirit just gave me this check. Like, why is there someone at your door on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock? And you were literally, 10 steps from being in that car and nobody could have stopped me.
Mm.
And so I had a pause and I'm like, confusing, like, but I'm horrible. I'm disgusting. I've sinned every sin in the book times a
Yeah.
thousand. Like God wouldn't come to my door. Why would God come to my door? So I invited him and I thought I was just going to grill him with questions he couldn't answer and then he'd run away and I'd finish what I started. But everything he told me, my spirit said, that's truth. Like I believed him and it's the Holy Spirit I know now. I didn't really know then. I just knew like, that makes perfect sense. Like perfect sense. But the thing that was most overwhelming is that that God loved me so much that his son laid down his life for me. And then, I add to that little moment, you showed up at my door,
Mm.
the worst person on earth, the most disgusting human's ever been born. And you wasted your time for me? Like, what does that even mean, right? So we prayed. I accepted Christ. He told me I'd be a new creation, that my sins would be forgiven. It was astounding, right? I'm like, too good to be true, but I still don't trust. So there
Right.
was probably not going to work. You might work for the little church kid, but I'm me, and I'm a failure. So God might be good, but I'm not. So I'm probably still going to fail. So very hesitant about being all in at that point.
Mm.
But I prayed, and then he went up to leave, 5 hours later, and I'm like, I need rehab. I'm in trouble. They're going to put me in a mental hospital, and that's really bad for me in a lot of ways. I had diagnosis of schizophrenia and bipolar, so the meds they put me on and the things they did to me, I was afraid of that. So
Yeah.
he found Teen Challenge, which
Hmm.
is a 1 year Christ-centered program. So I literally spent a year in the Word, worshiping God, hearing testimonies, and I was on fire. Like I couldn't put the Bible down. Like I was doing men's laundry, the worst job in the house because it's just disgusting. Because I
Yeah.
got to sit in the basement with the washer and dryer and the Word of God and just be with my new best friend.
Yeah. Wow. So beautiful. So
That was
can
the
can I
turning point of everything.
that is so, I mean, like, gosh, I mean, I'm just taking it all in because, I mean, wow, like that's the God that we serve. First off, is that he is, never late. He's on time, and he
Amen.
does love us, and he does want good for our life. I kind of, just one of the things you mentioned a minute ago about being afraid of going to the mental institution. I just want to preface, back then, it was not uncommon that a lot of people who went through sexual abuse because of things that they would report, of the way that they would report, if they say, oh yes, I do that, yeah, I hear that, I see that,
Yep.
or different
Yep.
things, then they would think that they were schizophrenic. And so it's not uncommon. I've seen it happen
Yeah.
multiple times in the early 90s where people had had sexual assault, but they labeled them as schizophrenia because of the, hallucinations, delusions,
Yeah. I would
the
stop the
all
school
the stuff
bus
that happened.
in complete panic, screaming
Yes.
to get off the bus because people were reading my mind.
Yes.
People could sexually assault me from their seat in
Yes.
my mind, and I would
Yes.
get afraid, and I had to get
Yes.
away, and I would go home, and
Yep.
I'd use all day. And those are
Sure.
the reasons. And my brain was confused, and I had all
Yeah,
kinds of
sure.
delusions and thoughts and unrealistic fears. God gave me a position to sit in his peace and his quiet and question all of those things and rewire and redesign what my thoughts and feelings were. And it
Yeah.
wasn't easy. I mean, I had to
Yeah.
distrust my own thoughts. That's a hard thing to understand.
Yeah.
But I definitely had schizophrenic behaviors, but I wasn't truly schizophrenic.
Right.
It
Right.
was
Yeah.
just trauma responses. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and
And
my
then
first,
this wasn't
first,
it. This
right.
wasn't it, right? So like
No,
once you went to Teen Challenge, the trouble wasn't over.
no,
What
no.
happened after that?
So I got out. I was not welcome back in my home. Lost all my friends because they were all unhealthy. So I had to write them off. The church from that man that met me on a dirt road, they let me park my car. I had a car, didn't have a license, didn't have insurance. So I parked it. They put fuel in it so I could warm myself. And that was my home. And I would go in during the day and lick envelopes with the church secretary, just talk to her about God. And I would go in
Yeah.
the pastor's office and just pray to start the morning. I would go to the women's knitting Bible study, these little old ladies, and say, can I hang out with you guys? And, they're like, you
Yeah.
come on in. And
Yeah.
people just poured into me and loved me and spoke the truth and the word of God. And, I remember, yeah, it wasn't all better. Like I would sit in that car and I'm like, I have nobody. I have nothing. I have no one to help me. I'm a homeless guy in the church parking. The church people even look at me funny. And there was some weird things with adults and people not wanting me around. So I had some of that churchy
Sure.
stuff happening. But I would get dark. I'm like, a suicide thought was just come right back. But there was this goofy man named Lenny. When he worshiped long arms, he'd just do this. And he'd come out and just open the door and jump in. He didn't knock. He just got my car. And like, how you doing? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm okay. And he's like, how you really doing? And he would somehow sense and know, and he would pray down heaven. He would cry. He would, a man, hold me in the most beautiful way. And like he fought the battle for me, because I just didn't know how. And I met him recently, really cool story of meeting him, and we both started crying. But I literally ran into his son, who was away from him and hadn't spoke to him in years. And I was sharing my testimony with this lady, and she goes, "Where was this?" And I mentioned Lenny. She goes, "Lenny's my son, my husband's dad's name." Found out it was. She said, "Call my husband right now." And I told the story, and he just wept. And he didn't know his dad. It was a divorce thing, but his dad, he went back to his father, and they were restored. So when I saw him, it was so cool that God gave me a chance to bless him back, if you will. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that was the messy journey of it. I got a job shoveling horse manure down the road, and the people there were godly people. So the man would just come in and he'd say, "You're the best manure shoveler I've ever seen." And he'd say, "You know what God told me this morning?" He'd share his morning devotions, and they just loved me and filled me up and took care of me. And, it was all just orchestrated by God. And
Yeah.
I expunged my record. I had some conviction over being forgiven, and I did bad things, and I was wrestling it, and knock on my window of my car, and the police were standing there, and they had some crimes that they thought a friend of mine committed, and I confessed. And I said, "While you're here, I need to confess every crime." Like I told them things they didn't even know
Yeah.
about. And then
Yeah.
we drove around and we got equipment back, but
Wow.
I had a bunch of felony charges, and was charged with one because the judge said, "I've never seen this. Like, that is, you don't need to go to prison." I was facing 12 years from all my other records and stuff. And the probation lady, I told her, she goes, "Well, how you staying sober? How you doing this?" I said, "Well, I'm in church every day of the week." And she goes, "Church," like with this deep smoker's voice. She had an ashtray this big on her desk full of ashes and butts. I mean, you could smoke in business then.
Mm.
And she just was angry that I said church, and I'm like, I'm in trouble. Like, this lady hates me, and she's the one that recommends to the judge. But I got one charge, one felony out of all of that. Later, went to court, met a beautiful, beautiful family. The guy was a judge. He expunged my record. So, like, there's a whole story in that too, where God just erased that. I was obedient. I was wrong. I said, "I'll take whatever the punishment is." I thought I was going to start prison ministry. I literally sold my stuff, gave away my car and things, because it was almost a guarantee that I was going to prison. But the judge said, "I don't think that's where you're going today." And he gave me 5 years probation. So
Wow.
I was blessed. I didn't understand the significance of one felony until I went to expunge it. That was a gift from God. But
Wow.
rebuilt my life from the ashes. I was hanging out with this cute little girl. She used to ride my bus. She would see me get on drunk. She'd see me beat people. Like, she thought I was the scariest human ever. And then I walked into youth group one day, and her eyes are as big as saucers. She's like, "That's that scary guy from my bus that always smelled like liquor." But her family integrated in the church. She would drive me to church. She was my best buddy. Wasn't interested in her romantically at all, because I wanted Jesus. I did not want a girl. I was just like, I didn't even want to think about that. But she was my favorite person on planet Earth. And she eventually became my wife. When I saw her go on a mission trip for her summer vacation at school, and realized this woman loves you so much, Lord, that she would give up when most kids are out going to Cedar Point. She's in India on a dirt floor in a sleeping bag with rats. That might be someone I could trust as a wife someday. And, God
Mhm.
kind of evolved that into being my wife of now 33 years. We've been together 38 and
Yay.
blessed with 3 kids.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I got my GD, went back to school. I heard in a class, if you know accounting and you know computers, you'll always have a job. So I went into accounting information systems just because I wanted job security, because I had financial insecurity. Not my job. It's a very introverted job. I became very extroverted. Sitting in a room alone, staring at numbers was maddening. It forced me to develop and grow and learn. We talked off camera a little bit about prejudices about not understanding certain people. I thought rich people were horrible because I grew up in a trailer park, and there's people with mansions, and like I didn't understand. And
Yeah.
God gave me clients that had helicopters on their
Mm.
yachts, and I got to know them and see their brokenness and their struggles. And, I needed that before I was
Yeah.
launched into full-time ministry. I needed a deeper understanding of all people. I can
Yeah.
understand the drug addict, trauma-induced, broken, poor person all day, but I didn't understand rich people. So God used
Yeah.
that to just help me grow and learn and understand all people and have more of a passion for that. And people with wealth can fund the ministries that help. There's just
Yeah.
a way God works and the way his church works that we need both.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to tell people, well, and actually when I wrote my book, I one of the things I write in there is about tithing can be a block to blessing if you are
Mhm.
not tithing in your life. And some people may not use the word as called tithing like the
Right.
church does, but I will tell you being in church and being on boards and things like that, we would have people who were business people who would bring checks into the church who did not attend church but
Right.
knew the law of reciprocity. And the law of
Yes.
reciprocity is like, first off, it's all God's anyway, whether you
Yeah.
think it
No.
is or not. But there is a
Right.
law within the Bible that is a universal law. It isn't a like you can go to heaven for this law. It is a
Yeah.
universal law that you give at least 10%.
Yep. Yep.
That's your tithes, and then there's an offerings above that if you want, whatever, God
Right.
lays on your heart. But knowing that that 10%, God expands that 90% in
Oh,
ways that you can't even fathom. And
no.
I remember the first time I read the book Rags to Riches, and he was sharing in there about how, like, he said, okay, God, well, I want to test you with giving 90%. And
Yeah.
he got to a point where he could give 90% and live off the 10%, but even more than that, like he had more money than he could do
Right.
anything with
Right.
because he trusted God with
Yeah.
that money. But
Yeah.
you will hear even multimillionaires who don't go to church for different reasons
Hmm.
that tithe
Oh,
because
yeah.
the belief and the understanding of the law of reciprocity. And
Yeah.
also, I know millionaires who are Christians who
Right.
go to church and they
Yeah.
believe in the law of
Oh,
reciprocity.
yeah.
And many times when I've worked with people either on the counseling or coaching side of life, or even done workshops and things, when I talk about that particular area, I have people all the time say, "Well, I can't give. I don't have enough to give." And
Right.
I'll start with people where they're at, and I'm like, "Okay, here's what I'm going to ask you to do: is I'm going to ask you just go around your house and find things because
Hmm.
things are worth money that you
Yeah.
don't use, that you don't want, and give those away." And
Hmm.
as or sell them, whatever God lays on
Yeah.
your heart, and then give a portion of that. And they
Hmm.
start doing that, and then they're like, "Oh my goodness, do you know what happened in my life?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I know, because I know the God that I serve." Like it's biblical. It's written in His Word. Like you
Yeah.
cannot. There
Cannot
are
go to bed.
biblical laws that
Right.
are universal laws that are true, and that's
Yeah.
one of
No.
those.
Right.
Yeah, so
It's fun.
beautiful.
I had a friend model that. He lost his business during the downturn in the real estate market, and family business just fell
Mhm.
down to almost nothing. He continued to work. He didn't turn his heat or his lights on at home. Like he was as frugal as a person could be to try to keep the doors open on, but paid his brother, didn't pay himself. And yet he would go to every widow, every divorced woman, and he'd cut wood for their winter, and he gave and he
Mhm.
gave and he gave and
Dave.
he gave.
Mhm.
And he just trusted God. And a few years later, a business came through town that had billions and billions of dollars, and he had 30 brand new trucks paid for with cash.
Yep.
And it's just beautiful. We lost
Yep.
everything 7 years ago to a bad person, that
Yeah.
took our entire life savings and put us in a
Mhm.
hole. And it was challenging. I've never missed a bill since I've been saved and,
Yeah.
been in working and walking with the Lord. And we've done really, really well. Now it's gone. And I'm like, at 50, okay, all your ideas, retirement, all that. But I'm like, you know what? You can't take from me. Like
That's
what
right.
God has is bigger than anything you could
That's
take.
right.
And we walked in integrity and how we handled this person, what we did. Like we really just prayed through it. And it's like God will choose how much we have or don't have. And we don't have to
Yes.
squabble over it or fight for it or worry about it.
That's right. That's right.
It was a
Yes.
cool season. And I've got, just to put in perspective of what we were talking about, some of the sexual abuse stuff, that lingered a while, right? I did some deep work with my
Sure.
mom, forgave her, baptized her, led her to the Lord. She was transformed and healed. We went back to her birth family. I met my biological father and
Wow.
in a coma. prayed with him, but did his funeral a week after I met him and he died. And God did amazing things through that. His brother, one of my sisters, and his wife all came to Christ. And I didn't even do an altar call per
Yeah.
se. They just wanted something that I had that they didn't and approached me on it. But this man that stole our money, he was a sociopath. First you're like,
Yeah.
definitely a narcissist, but it turns out he was a sociopath. I was working for him in transition of leaving church. And he had access to all my retirement accounts and everything. And he created false contracts that said I signed it over to him, and it was bad. And he was so far ahead of me in his scheme that I couldn't do anything
Sure.
about it. He had put recording devices in my computers, in my office, in my car. He had a tracker on my car. He was just a bad person. But when the dust settled and I walked away and finally got the FBI and some police to get him out of my life, because then he was harassing us and doing awful things to my family. And we're still trying to honor God in our responses.
Right.
But the dust settled and like, okay, God, this happened. It was filtered through your hands, I mean, I understand it rains in the just, the unjust. So I cross paths with a psychopath. God doesn't necessarily, doesn't take his free will away or mine to work for him. So sometimes that happens. But the thing that happened in it that I couldn't have paid $1 million for is as a child, you're being abused the way I was. You're defenseless. You can't fight back. You can't say no. I mean,
Right.
your own. And they were evil. Like it's the things they did, and you can't describe it. And
Right.
there's such a like, man, I wish I knew how to fight back or do something. I can't. Well, this man, literally as he stole like $30,000 to my face one day, said, "You're such a worthless piece of crap." And he says, "How do your wife even make love to such a loser, awful, stupid person?" He's just heaping humiliation, and he owes me all this money. So if I react, he just takes my money and runs. So I was in this slavery situation, and it triggered me hard. Like, okay, no one's ever gonna hurt me again. I got to fight back. I had thoughts of doing awful things, but I kept going to the Lord. He's like, no, compassion, mercy, love, grace. This man doesn't know me. You may be the only me he sees. It was all over, and I'm just contemplating. And I realized that God gave me a literal person as evil and dark and as abusive as the people that hurt me as a child. And now, as a grown, mature man of God, I get to face that. And
Yeah.
I get to say, no, you don't get to hurt me. But I didn't have to react in rage or anger or hurt him back. It was just as simply a handshake. Um, and I was kind and compassionate and loving. And I say, in joking terms, I kicked his ass.
Hmm.
He wanted me to fight. He tried to provoke fighting. He did a lot of really dark things. And I didn't take the bait.
Yeah.
I looked my enemy in the eye and I had love and compassion and grace and mercy. And I walked away politely. And I realized like that was so powerful for me
Hmm.
because I can't go back and do that from my childhood. But God gave me this like situation that was identical. And I got to see me in that moment now being who I am in him. And it was life giving. I know my wife's like, I didn't want to have $1 million counseling, payment,
Yeah.
but it really was. It was something I
Yeah.
wouldn't have known how to ask God for that. Like I
Yes.
really just want to take back that part of my childhood that you just can't. And God gave me a way to do it. And it was so similar and so his
Yeah.
darkness was so real that I thought, wow, thanks, God.
Yeah. Oh, how beautiful. Now, so a couple things though, I
Yeah.
know based on our talk before, like most of your family are now Christian,
Yeah.
like your life because of you going, here it is, God, here am I, like he has transformed the legacy of your whole family, right,
Yeah.
out of
Yeah.
this.
Amen.
It's so beautiful. I love that so much. And I think that, I just want to make sure that I say that on here is like, sometimes out of the evilness and darkness that we go through. And I can say most of my family are Christians today now because of things that I went through and that I agreed that I'm fighting to change the legacy for.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to God for that. But just know that if you think your family's over here and you're like, wow, like I don't know if I could ever really forgive and love them, like, you don't have to do it in your own
Yeah.
power. You can do
No.
it in God's power. And it's it doesn't mean you don't have boundaries,
Right.
but it
Right.
does mean that you can. pray that God shifts and changes their hearts and changes your heart in those aspects. And when it does, it's so beautiful when God does that work, and then you get to see the legacy ripple effect of
Yeah.
change
Yeah.
in their lives. So beautiful.
My
And then
mom
I
was,
want to,
no, good.
yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
said my mom was a big one because I
Yeah,
loved her, but there was a part of me that hated her. Like you hurt the
sure.
core of my being.
Yes.
Like I'm a CPA. I was a straight A college student. I had a
Yeah.
3.97 because I was afraid to be stupid because I was called stupid my whole life. Not because I'm
Yeah.
smarter than anybody. I just worked really, really, really hard and didn't sleep,
Yes.
just to prove something. But I go start my first job and I get one critique and I'm like, I'm a worthless piece of garbage. I'm going to kill myself. And I know my mom participated in putting that in me. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden I'm feeling resentment against her again. Like, I'm never going to make it. Like, there's all of these things fighting me that my
Yeah.
mother did to me. And I'd get around her as a Christian. I'd forgive her. And I said I forgive her. And my wife would say, you get off when you get around your mom. And we were boundary. We saw her in little increments because she wasn't well yet. Eventually, led her to Christ in the most chaotic, bloody, violent moment ever. And in my fear and trying to respond, I just put a hand on her and I said, in the name of Jesus, you no longer have control or dominion over my mother.
Yes.
And
Oh.
she's still raging out on me. And she had thrown herself down and hurt herself. And she went from this raging maniac that I grew up with my whole life to this whimpering, gentle, sweet little girl in God's arms. And she met Christ that day on our steps, where she had thrown herself down and our life changed and we did have beautiful things, but she'd more years of being in that trauma and brokenness than I did. So it didn't change overnight.
Sure.
And, but I sat down, like, God convicted me, you have to forgive her. I'm like, I don't know how, God.
Yeah.
So I wrote a letter. And in the letter, I couldn't say I forgive you for, breaking my toes and fingers and, some of the violence because that'll hurt her. And I'm like, I don't want to hurt my mom. I don't want to point out her sin to forgive her. So I was struggling with this. It's mean to forgive her, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't want to hurt her in giving her forgiveness. So is there a way I can do this, God? And I wrote down at the top of the paper, I said, Mom, thank you that you were a homeless girl with nobody and you had a baby that you didn't ask for that came to you violently and you chose to give me life. I broke and cried. I don't know how long I cried, but I was overwhelmed. Like, I never saw my mom. I never thought about this. And now I'm a person that loves everybody and has compassion
Yeah.
for everybody. But I saw this poor woman had been horrifically abused in a homeless shelter.
Mm.
And it sunk in like there's a really powerful, amazing woman in there that did that. And then I just wrote, thank you for, like, thank you for working 3 jobs. Thank you for buying Christmas
Wow.
presents, knowing that we'd get shut off notices 2 weeks later. And I just tried to tell her I love her and all the motherly things that went on through all the other stuff. Because sometimes you forget that. Like, there was a person in there trying to be a mom, trying the best she can with what she had. So God gave me a vision of her like I'd never had before. And the bottom line of the letter says, Mom, for the rest of our lives, I will never bring up our past to you in a way that would hurt you. And
Wow.
that is my commitment. And I never did. I never said, well, you did and that did. She read it every day for a year. I gave it to our Mother's Day. She read it literally every
Wow.
day. And after a year, she wanted to come talk to me. And of course, she, was devastated and overwhelmed and could hardly accept the forgiveness because, she was hurt and then you hurt your
Yes.
child, that shame that she carried from that. But
Yeah.
that was the best day of my life. She just passed recently and there was a box in the attic said Timmy all over it and bright yellow tape. And in that box was that letter. And I was able
Wow.
to read it and go, wow, God, that isn't me. That was
Yeah.
Holy Spirit entirely. That
Absolutely.
opened the floodgates. Then
That's
we got to points of Mom, let's go back to your family and let's do this. And I had to
ah,
put that video on Amazon Prime when it was made. I said, nobody gets to see it unless I get permission. So I had to go to my family and say, we're going to tell the world some
yeah.
really ugly stuff. And that took it out of the darkness and put it in the light. Conversation started happening. I came back and my mom came back with love and compassion and forgiveness. And, you know,
Wow.
it just opened the doors, and yeah, lots
Wow.
of them, everybody to a person
Yeah.
in her siblings and her 100-year-old mother all came to Christ
I
and
love
wrote
it.
a new story, and my wife's
So
family,
beautiful.
same thing. Um,
So
greatest
beautiful.
greatest part of my story is that, I think, because my mom didn't die as healed as me. I started at 20. She
Yeah.
started much later.
Yeah.
So there were still some triggers and
Yeah.
deep dark things, and her trauma would show up. And it's okay though, because
Yeah.
the bigger story is she was completely healed the day she took her last
Exactly.
breath, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love it. And I love to say that as one of my favorite saying is you're not too old, you're not too broken, you're not too
Oh,
sick, for God to help shift and change your life miraculously. He
amen.
loves you so much. You are a masterpiece. He created you a masterpiece.
Amen.
Underneath all this mess,
Yeah.
you're a masterpiece and God loves you and wants to show you the masterpiece you were always created to be without all that programming, without all that trauma,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I know that's what you do. So share a little bit about now what you do, your coaching, and so how people can connect with you and
Yeah.
anything else that you want to share with our
I
audience
did
before we go.
pastoral counseling in a church for quite a few years, for 12
Mhm.
years. We're in a very wealthy, suburban, primarily white, educated community. Um, and I don't mean that makes all those people bad, but I was doing recovery ministry. Our recovery ministry outgrew our church at one point. So we had all these, we do 40 baptisms, and it would be prostitutes and drug addicts, and just the energy and the enthusiasm that came into our church. And prior to that, it was just a normal church, religious, our little Bible study with all good Christians. And so it kind of upset the apple cart. We also had an indoor skate park, and we shared the gospel with 10,000 kids in 10 years through that ministry. But a few people weren't fond of the type of people and that type of ministry, and they kind of fought back, and it got weird, like churches can. But God did amazing work. Like, it was like we had people coming to volunteer just because they wanted to be near all these miracles. And it was beautiful, beautiful. But it was restricting. I don't want to sit in a meeting for 2 hours arguing over what color we're going to put on some dumb bulletin. There was a lot of that just was restricting for me, seeing and helping more people. There were some ways the church wasn't always the safest place for some people where they're on in their journey. So, there was just stuff. And we came to a place where we couldn't align with the vision more of the church. We stepped out, no job, no idea what we're going to do next. There was some deeper issues, but we left and started over. But people followed me and said, I want you to help me. I want you to keep working on our marriage and helping, you saved my
Yeah.
son's life. Now his brother has a problem. And I was ashamed to take money. Like, this is who I am. I do this because I love people. And, I
Mhm.
kind of became a pastor because I was doing pastoral work anyway, and they just kind of put me in, and it gave me more room. But so I was insecure about being paid for it, and people were forcing me to take money. And then I'm like, okay, what is this coaching thing? Started looking into it, started seeing how it fit and how I could do that. So I do full-time coaching. I meet people all day, every day. I specialize in relationships. I'm really passionate about healing families.
Love that.
It's hard work and messy work, but I'm willing to get dirty for someone to get what I got out of life. I do a lot of trauma work. I do a lot of people with suicidal ideation, alcohol, and drug addiction, because that was a big part of my story. Sexual addiction,
Yeah.
sexual abuse, of course. And, my prayer is that God brings the right people that align with me.
Yes.
I don't need to be
That's right.
everybody's person.
That's
And
right.
I found that the people that come to me are me, like people that are out there and they have stories that you can't imagine. And they've gone to counselors or fallen asleep while they're talking to them, or very clinical and dry, and they don't trust, so they can't trust. And they end up here and they realize, I get it, I've lived it, I see it, and they open their heart and healing begins. So
Yeah.
do a lot
Love
of
that.
that, kind of jack of all trades that way. If they come in and I share, hey, if we're going to work together, here's kind of how I'd like to approach it. Here's some ideas, and I'll hold you accountable to growth and give you
Yep.
resources and other ways to heal. And I love, love, love that I get to do that every day,
I love it.
because I love people.
I
And,
love it. So
you know,
beautiful.
I'll,
Now, do you do online and in person
I
or just in
do.
person? Okay,
I
great.
do a lot
Okay,
online. Like
awesome.
that video is on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
So like I had a lady from
Yeah.
Manitoba, Canada, way out in the sticks, who's
Awesome.
very, very alone. And she
Yeah.
accidentally watched it and now she's
Yay.
working with me, So yeah,
Awesome. Great.
thanks for
Awesome.
asking
So,
that.
and tell everybody your website to how to connect with you if they want to connect with you, which I'll also put the link down below, but I know sometimes people like just to hear it out loud so
Yeah.
they hear it.
So my business is Thrive, moving from surviving to thriving. So
Yeah.
thrivecoaching.net. That is the
Perfect.
best way to find me. My name is Tim Wessel. So if you're a Facebook
Yeah.
person, you can find me pretty easy. And
Awesome.
then I think you got the link to my link tree with all
Yes.
my other socials and stuff. But
Awesome.
I
Perfect.
try not
Yeah.
to be hard to get a hold of. I like people to be able to find me and reach me. And there is no cost to talk to anybody. Like I will never ever turn someone away for money, because sometimes just one conversation can change our life. So
That's right.
that's always
Oh,
where we start.
beautiful. Beautiful. Well,
And I
thank
get
you
to
so
meet some
much.
amazing people, right?
Yeah, I love it so much. Oh, Tim, this is, I mean, we could talk for days and
I think
hours. This
so.
has been
Yeah.
so great. And I love to later on eventually do another talk because I think there's so many, other angles we can talk about. And I'm just so grateful for, you coming on and sharing your testimony. Again, I think it's so important that we understand, like, men are affected by domestic violence, by sexual assault as well. And then what comes out of that, and then also what comes out of the healing though, and
Yeah.
how God can shift and change a person's life. And and sometimes there is that messy thing of like, oh, I'm not ready to forgive this person, but if you let God do it, whatever direction he takes you, like he did with you, Tim, is like, okay, you don't have to write all the messy, you can write it this way. Whatever God takes you through, that's okay. And I
Right.
will say, if you're going through those things, it's great to have somebody, an accountability person who's gone through these things,
Right.
because one is, they know what it's like to be under those hidden scars, and there you're going, like, I have walls up. If you knew how bad this stuff was, like, I can't even share it. And
Right.
so
Right.
having a person like Tim to walk through while you're going through these things can be such a gift in itself. And so, Tim, I thank you so much for being here. And for anybody
Thanks
else
for
who's
having me.
listening, I just want you to know you are a masterpiece. You are
Yes.
blessed. Be a
Yes.
blessing and reach out if anyone can help you. Until next time.